Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're really embarking on a journey into some pretty intricate layers of declassified history.
That's right.
We've managed to unearth two, compelling intelligence documents from the National Archives. One's from the early 70s, the other late 60s.
And they revealed this fascinating, sometimes frankly surprising network, Cuban exile activities, intelligence interest, and some really unexpected connections to big historical events.
Yeah, unexpected is the word. So just so you know what we're working with, our sources are, first, a May 1973 memorandum. It's about a media inquiry looking into possible Cuban involvement in Watergate and just general attitudes down in Miami.
And the second one is an August 1969 FBI memo. This one details a suspected espionage operation focusing on one individual.
So our mission today, we want to carefully unpack these files, pull out the really potent insights, and try to, grasp the nuances. Intelligence gathering, the lives of Cuban exiles. It was definitely a tumultuous time, intense scrutiny.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's peel back that first layer. We're starting in Miami, May 1973. You have to picture the scene, right? Watergate is exploding everywhere.
Dominating the news, yeah.
And right into that atmosphere, this memorandum appears. It focuses on a media inquiry made to a guy named Rene Vieira Gonzalez. He's a Cuban exile journalist, writes for Diario Las Americas, also owns a bookstore in Miami.
The Westchester Mail bookstore. And the caller, according to this memo, was a Sanford Gottlieb, believed to be a former employee of the National Committee on Sane Nuclear Policy. SANE,
Right. And Gottlieb claimed he was with the New York Times Bureau, said he was asking about Watergate, what people in Miami, specifically Cubans, were saying about the case.
A pretty standard reporter pretext, maybe?
Maybe. But here's where it gets really interesting. The document reports Gottlieb had just been appointed political chief in the Republican Party.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So a former SAMU employee claiming to be NYT, asking about Watergate, and he's just become a Republican political chief. That's quite a combination.
That is. It immediately makes you question the call, doesn't it? What was the real agenda? Was he gathering political intel or something else?
Exactly. And what does that tell you about how maybe intelligence agencies were viewing these lines between politics and, other activities?
Well, it suggests they were very aware of people who could operate in both spheres, the overt political role and potentially more covert information gathering. What's really telling is how fast the memo connects Gottlieb to other people. It wasn't like this call came out of the blue for them.
Right. They already knew the network.
Exactly. He reportedly had info on Ronaldo Pico, former 2506 Brigade, Bay of Pigs vet, Rolando Piedra, former head of the Cuban Bureau of Investigation, and Rolando Masfer, a former Cuban senator, and this is interesting, a self-admitted former communist.
Quite a list. The memo also mentions Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo. He was the former chief of WH Miami Proprietary.
Which means basically head of a covert front company run by the agency in Miami.
Right. Amicably terminated in 72, it says. And Juan A. Paula, another former employee of that same proprietary.
And then there's Edgardo Butori, Cuban, but born in West Tampa, Florida, former Cuban congressman, minister of commerce, and reportedly associated with Charles Bebe Rebozo.
Nixie's close friend. Yeah, it's a tightly woven group.
It really is, and the connections, they just keep going deeper. The memo brings in Marvin L. Evans, chief of NMA Chuchul.
Another one of these proprietary operations.
Exactly. Protected, compartmented, meaning very secret, very sensitive. And Evans reported on Juan A. Paula, the guy we just mentioned. Paula actually worked for the NMA Chuchul proprietary Northwest Management Services, Inc. It was basically office space cover, unlisted phone, the works.
Wow. And here's a detail that really jumped out at me. Checks sent to the dependents of imprisoned assets, people working for the agency who got caught, were signed by Paula.
That's right. It shows this really direct, almost, administrative role in keeping these covert support lines open. Not just spying, but managing the consequences.
Okay, but hold on, because here comes the twist. The other part of the office space where this NMA front was operating, it was occupied by a legitimate law firm, and guess who their client was?
Who?
John Dean.
The John Dean.
Watergate
John Dean.
The very same. Former White House counsel right in the thick of the scandal. And the document explicitly states these lawyers were cleared and witting.
Cleared and witting. Meaning they knew about the intelligence connection. They knew who shared their office space.
That's what it implies. It's not just a coincidence of sharing a building. It suggests Dean's own legal team, dealing with Watergate, was operating cheek by jowl with a covert intelligence operation, and they knew it. Sanctioned, even.
It blurs everything, doesn't
Okay.
it? Politics, law, intelligence, all tangled up right there. Who knew what? Who was influencing whom?
Right, and the memo adds another layer. There was a common receptionist area staffed by NMA Mutual employees, and they monitored all incoming and outgoing calls, not just for the proprietary, but for the law firm too, presumably. They noted numerous calls from the media and outgoing overseas calls to places like Japan and Europe.
So total communication control in that space. And Marvin Evans, the NM Mutual chief, was planning trips to Nassau and Miami right then, May 73, to meet with the chief of station for WH Miami. High-level coordination was ongoing.
So what does this all tell us? It's not just that these worlds, politics, law, media, intelligence bumped into each other. It seems like intelligence operations kind of permeated these legitimate structures during a massive national crisis.
It really does. It makes you rethink how things operate behind the scenes. You see a media inquiry, you see lawyers representing a key figure, but underneath, there's this whole other layer of intelligence interest, covert networks.
It's a rare glimpse, isn't it, into how far these networks reached, from journalists to Nixon's confidants to John Dean's lawyers, all under the intelligence community's watchful eye.
Yeah, the 73 document is a snapshot, but it suggests a landscape where these connections were maybe more common, more integrated than we usually imagine, especially in places like Miami back then.
Okay, so that snapshot from 73 is pretty mind-blowing, but to really get the context, the environment these people were operating in, we need to rewind a few years.
Right. Let's go back to August 1969. Different document, different focus.
This one's an FBI memorandum. It's about a man named Lazaro Eddie Espinosa Bonet, and it gets into a very detailed, very personal, suspected espionage investigation concerning Cuba.
Okay, so the scene shifts. New Jersey, 1969. Espinosa gets a phone call August 4th. Carlstadt, New Jersey.
And that leads pretty quickly to actual meetings, covert meetings, classic intelligence tradecraft, like you said.
Yeah. The first one, August 5th, is at the UN headquarters in New York City.
Interesting location. Neutral ground, maybe?
Could be. Then a week later, August 12th, they meet again, this time up in the Bronx, Bronx Pape East, and Allerton Avenue.
And this detail really grabbed me. Espinosa is carrying a miniature tape recorder. The memo actually describes it, about 3 by 4 inches, 2 or 3 inches thick, with little reels of tape inside.
That's incredibly specific. Not just a recorder, but the dimensions, the reels. It grounds it in reality. This was operational gear.
So what was on the tapes?
Well, Espinosa said it was his account of things. 3 or 4 reels, 30 minutes per side. But he was apparently reluctant to reveal his real identity. And whoever he was meeting with thought his previous report was poorly prepared.
Huh, like getting notes from an editor.
Exactly. They told him to be more specific next time. So this suggests it wasn't the first contact. There's already a handler-agent dynamic going on. They're scrutinizing the product, the intel he's providing.
Okay, so he's reporting something, but the memo also says he was asking questions himself, right? About people in Miami, CIA operations.
Yes, and this is where it gets intricate. He's asking about his connections down there. He knew or asked about someone called P.J. Epifanio Romero. Previously connected, it says. He asked about Raul Villaverde. Specifically, was he a CIA instructor for explosives?
Wow. That's not just asking who someone is, that's asking about their specific operational role.
Precisely. It shows a level of insider knowledge, or at least informed curiosity. Was he trying to confirm things he already suspected, or gathering intel on the network for whoever he was reporting to?
Good question. Who else did he mention?
La Osa, Filiberto Leon Delgado, described as a past team member for infiltration, runs into Cuba. Justo Lorette, a colleague who was apparently still operating for the CIA at the time.
So active agents, past agents?
Right, and then more names in Miami. Otto, Otto. Javier Sudo, identified flat out as the principal agent for the CIA. Edgar Sono, active in anti-Castro radio, which was often linked to intelligence ops. Manuel Artemex, a leader from the Bay of Pigs invasion.
That's a significant list. He seemed to know the landscape pretty well.
Very well. Others involved in infiltration or CIA ops mentioned were Arturo Fallon, Dr. Rafael Molina Salcedo, Andres Romero, Caridad Gonzalez Machin. It's a dense network.
And then there was that personal detail, his cousin.
Yeah, Heriberto Delgado, Espinosa's cousin.
Yeah.
Killed back in '57 during an assault on the Batista Palace in Cuba. And the memo notes, he was thought to be a communist.
That adds such a human layer, doesn't it? These aren't just names in a file. There are family histories, political legacies, personal losses, all tangled up in the espionage.
Absolutely. And it maybe hints at the complexities of Espinosa's own position.
Yeah.
Which brings us to his motivations. This is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay. Why was he cooperating? The memo mentions CHU.
Yeah, likely the Cuban Human Rights Unity Network. He initially said his reasons were politically motivated, standard enough, but then
Fun.
he also said it was driven by the fact that his parents back in Cuba were receiving luxuries, things they wouldn't normally get.
Ah. So not purely ideology, personal benefit, or rather, benefit for his family.
Exactly, and he apparently didn't feel oppressed himself. He didn't think the U.S. would actually manage to force Castro out. He called Cuba his fatherland.
Wow. So he's cooperating with presumably U.S.-linked entities while still feeling loyalty to Cuba. And his main driver might be ensuring his parents get preferential treatment from the Cuban government.
It seems that way. He even said he wished for fair treatment for his parents from the Cuban government. It's incredibly complex, not black and white at all.
Yeah.
It's personal loyalty, family obligation, maybe some pragmatism, all mixed together.
That really challenges the simple narratives, doesn't it? Hero, traitor. It's much murkier. These were real people navigating impossible situations.
Definitely. The moral ambiguity is thick, and the operational details continue.
Yeah.
He mentioned having a Black Walther OMN automatic pistol.
So potentially armed, ready for action, maybe?
Or wanting to appear ready, and those little details about the meetings. Buying a fountain drink at a luncheonette, specifically not making a call from a nearby phone booth, using a cigarette package as a dead drop for future reports.
It sounds like something out of a spy novel, but this is an actual FBI report.
Right. It brings that world to life. And there's more on the internal dynamics. Espinosa was apparently connected to a Jose Ramon Higues.
And who was he?
Higues was organizing a group called Vanguardia Revolucionaria Cubana, and their stated goal, ultimately bombing CN.
Wait, bombing the very group Espinosa was supposedly cooperating with?
That's what the memo says. It highlights the intense rivalries and conflicts within the anti-Castro exile community itself. They weren't monolithic.
Clearly not. So where did things leave off?
Well, they planned future meetings, one in Miami, another back in New Jersey. Specific dates were set for future information drops. It was clearly an ongoing operation at the time of the report.
So stepping back from the details of Espinosa's case, what does this 1969 memo show us about the bigger picture?
I think it paints this incredibly vivid picture of the risks involved, the operational nuts and bolts, the tape recorders, the dead drops, but also the complexity, the contradictory motivations, the personal stakes, the internal conflicts.
And it really underscores the deep, granular interest intelligence agencies had in tracking these individuals, not just their actions, but their connections, their families, their potential vulnerabilities.
Exactly. It wasn't just about collecting facts on enemies. It was about understanding the entire human and political landscape these people operated in, how to potentially use them, influence them, or neutralize them.
Moving beyond just the what to the why, like you said.
Right, but it also makes you pause and think. When the motivations are this tangled, how reliable is the information being passed? How much is colored by personal agenda? That's always the challenge with human intelligence.
That's a really important point. Okay, so we've dug into these two documents, 73 and 69. As we start to wrap this up, what are the big recurring themes connecting them?
Well, first, just the sheer breadth of these networks.
Yeah.
Both documents, years apart, different contexts, Watergate, espionage, they both reveal how extensive and varied these Cuban exile networks were. Journalism, business, politics, covert ops, it's all interconnected.
And flowing from that, the constant intelligence scrutiny.
Absolutely. U.S. agencies, FBI, CIA, whoever NMHU tool was, they were intensely focused on these groups. For counterspying, maybe political influence, maybe just gathering information. It's a consistent thread.
And the lines are so blurry, aren't they, between what's overt and what's covert?
Definitely. People wearing multiple hats, public roles, hidden affiliations, conflicting motivations like we saw with Espinosa. It really messes with any simple understanding of loyalty or who was on which side.
Which brings up a crucial point, I think, for you listening. When you're faced with information like this, fragmented, maybe based on partial intel, full of assumptions, how do you actually piece together what was really going on?
It's tough. These documents are snapshots. They might have unverified claims or deliberately obscure things. You have to read them critically, cross-reference if possible, and always remember you might not be getting the full picture from just one file.
It really underscores the challenge of historical research using intelligence records.
It does.
Yeah.
But it also shows the value. Well, these deep dives, they give us a glimpse, however partial, into the painstaking, incredibly detailed work of intelligence gathering. And maybe more importantly, the complex human stories behind the jargon and the file numbers.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that history isn't simple. Even official documents have layers of hidden meaning, hidden motives, things waiting to be uncovered.
And they force us to look beyond just the headlines, right? To appreciate the intricate, often invisible forces that were shaping events, and maybe still are in some ways.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. We looked at that May 73 memo, the surprising Watergate links, John Dean's lawyers sharing space with a proprietary The Media Inquiry.
And then we went back to the August 69 FBI memo. Espinoza, the tape recorder, the complex motivations, the detailed spycraft, the internal exile conflicts.
Both documents painting this vivid picture of Cuban exile networks and the intense intelligence focus on them.
And think about how these seemingly separate things, Watergate fallout, and espionage case, they connect. They connect through this enduring intelligence interest in certain communities, certain individuals, especially during times of political upheaval.
It shows how persistent that focus was.
It really does. And it leaves you with a thought, doesn't it?
Which is?
How many other major historical events might have these hidden intelligence connections? Threads waiting in declassified files that could subtly reshape how we understand the past. What else is waiting to be unearthed?
That is a fascinating thought to leave everyone with, something to mull over. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging.